Hello, I am Leila Ghoshi, editor of Baladi Magazine, and I'm so thrilled to welcome Agavny Vardanyan. Um, I'm still learning to pronounce her last name, who is a wonderful, talented illustrator, writer, editor, Armenian American, and just has so many interesting things to discuss and share. So I'm so glad to welcome her here today. And I do want us to hear more about her bio. So I'm going to pull that up for us. And we apologize for the late start, had to get a few housekeeping things done behind the scenes. Okay, so Agavny Vardanyan is an Armenian American character designer and prop artist based in Los Angeles, California. Most recently, she has worked as a full-time prop artist for HBO Max's Fired on Mars. She has worked as a children's book illustrator for GarTam Books, has worked with indie bestseller Allison Saft, who is a New York Times bestselling author, and she is currently working on her first graphic novel, The Pomegranate Princess. I love that. She is the editor of the Split Pomegranate, Sacred Seeds collaborative digital zine to benefit Artsakh refugees. Over 100,000 indigenous Armenians were displaced from Artsakh by Azerbaijan in September 2023. And we'll discuss a little more about that at the end of our sessions today. But welcome, Agavny. I'm so glad that you're here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here.
Sure. So I think I just want to start off by asking what, when you knew you wanted to be an artist, and when you knew what particular style of art you wanted to pursue.
Yeah, so I've been drawing ever since I can remember, ever since I was very young. Art has always been something that excited me. It's kind of something that runs in the family. My uncle is a painter,
Oh,
and so I'm really lucky that like my family has very much fostered my love of art and illustration. When I was very young, my assumption with being like a girl who really likes to draw was that I would become a fashion designer. So a
mhm.
lot of my early drawings are really like crudely drawn fashion illustrations and all those things. But it was something I loved to do until in middle school I started getting more interested in animation. And our middle school actually had an animation class, and it's kind of where that interest started to sprout even further from. And I started realizing that I wasn't just interested in like designing clothes, but I was interested in designing the characters and the people wearing the clothes. And where like my sort of main style really I feel like was inspired by, I grew up watching quite a few like Soviet animated films, because the animation within the Soviet Union, like Armenia, it really kind of blossomed during that time period, and the art style is just so specific and beautiful and has this very fairy tale storybook like quality to it that a lot of American animation didn't have, even though I do love like, the classics by Disney and whatnot. The true nostalgia sort of comes from that art style. And in middle school, our teacher showed us this animated film called The Secret of Kells by an Irish animation studio called Cartoon Saloon. And that movie kind of like completely changed me in some way, because they based the art style after the Book of Kells, which is an illuminated manuscript. And so seeing these character designs that are drawn in a way where they look like they're from these manuscripts, and the colors are so vibrant, and there's this, it's extremely stylized. It's not meant to look realistic, and that's what makes it like even more exciting to watch. And that's when our teacher passed out character design sheets, and I feel like that's probably the first time I had seen character design sheets, and it made me like realize that that's kind of what I wanted to work in. And it kind of became my obsession ever since, was wanting to work in that field. And I'm really lucky that in 2022, I got to work as a prop designer for a series. And yeah, the goal still stands. It's still my dream. But while I've been job hunting and I had so much free time, that's kind of where working on my graphic novel sort of started. It's like, well, I have free time, I might as well use it. And yeah.
Wow, that is fascinating. So, about what age were you then? I mean, because it's really great you had exposure to like international styles, I think,
Hmm.
as you were, starting to learn your profession. So, um, yeah, about what time period was that?
I mean, I can't really say for the Soviet era animation stuff because I must have been so young. Our parents were just showing it to us. But in
Uh,
terms of middle school, and at least the time period where I can put around when I started being interested in online art, which I think correlates to me getting interested in animation. Um, I believe I was probably around 12 years old, which is like,
yeah.
I'm 24 now, so it's like been half of my life essentially that like it's been what I wanted to do. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's fascinating. And now I'm thinking to look up Soviet animation, honestly, because I had not
Yeah.
really considered that before. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Armenia, when would you say you started including Armenian themes in your work?
That's a great question, really, because I mean, when I look at like my artwork as a kid, like I said, a lot of it is like fashion related, or I would draw like a lot of animals and stuff like most kids would.
Mhm.
Um, but I remember, I'm not sure if it was like middle school or high school, where our art teacher told us about an art contest that was being held specifically for like Armenian artists.
Oh,
Um, and so I entered like two of those contests over time. And I
mhm.
think I got third place in one of the contests too. But I feel like that because it's kind of hard for me to remember when I look at my art, I don't see a lot of Armenian art until later on down the line.
Mhm.
And then in university, really, I took a design course and we were told to like create an illustration that had like over 100 things in it. So I was like, okay, I'll make a pattern. And that's where the Armenian harvest illustration that you see, there is a similar piece to that. It's the blue and red one called Armenian music. That was the pattern that I had created for that class. And just sitting down and drawing like all those Armenian women with the different cultural clothing. I don't know what it was, but I enjoyed it. I loved it so much. And I think because it connected back to when I was very young, drawing women in clothing. And it was something that came so easily to my hands somehow. Like you kind of realize where it's like you're drawing all these things, but there's something that is like the easiest to you. There's something that comes the most naturally to you. And I guess to me, what came so naturally was just drawing women in beautiful, ornate clothing and jewelry. And that's kind of exactly what this type of patterning involved. And so I was like, I want to do more of that. And I feel like that's kind of how that snowballed.
Yeah, I brought the Armenian harvest image up on the
Yes.
screen, and I love all of your work. But I can
Thank you.
see now that you're saying that, I can see what you mean by the clothing
Yes.
and drawing clothing, and the colors. In this particular case, or any of the illustration you're doing, do you pick colors for a certain a certain symbolic meaning, or is it more a case of just balancing contrasts?
I
What do
think the truth is balancing contrast, honestly, because
you,
I mean, I would love to know much more about symbolism with colors. In some of my work, there is, but in like these patterned cases, it was about like finding that balance where you kind of create a monochromatic look. That's how I started with the Armenian music, where it's all this teal and it's the different hues of the teal color, but then you want to add in a pop of a color that is the complete opposite to it, and that makes it stand out even more, and it like brings attention to certain specific things in the drawing. And that's how like this sort of collection of images came about, where I wanted them to all complement each other, but still look kind of different. And so, yeah, that's how like the harvest illustration works, is that it's all these different tones of green and then the orange pops.
Yeah, I just love it. I just think it's
Thank
wonderful.
you. Thank
Uh,
you so much.
that reminds me, I'll go ahead and pull your website up if that's okay. That shows a
Yeah,
few,
that's totally fine.
yeah, a few other selections. But while I'm doing that, I
Mhm.
want to follow up and ask more about both the Armenian community in Southern California, because yes, there is a large community there, right, of diaspora Armenians. So I think that's really great to have been able to grow up in that kind of supportive, you know, subculture, I guess, of California. Um,
Mm,
and you've also traveled to Armenia, right? So
yes.
can you just give me a sense of your progression of realizing your culture and maybe how you balance that with what we call American culture?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually really interesting because when I look at like my relationship with, I guess, my community, I can say it hasn't always been like the most perfect relationship. There is a lot of, and I feel like a lot of people from a lot of different cultures feel the same way when it comes to people that were born in a different country of their origin, and then the people who immigrate here. There can a lot of times be that separation where people who come here from Armenia see Armenians born in America very differently,
Mhm.
um, and it, and Armenians born in America also having a really complicated relationship with their own Armenianness. For me, it's always been interesting because I guess I can't really explain why I have that love for my culture, because I have met so many Armenians as a student growing up, Armenians born in America, where they looked me straight in the face and be like, "Oh, I hate Armenians. They're all horrible. I can't handle them. This, that." And I just kind of sit there and look at them, and it's like, what do you mean?" And it isn't as though I haven't dealt with my fair share of, uh, complicated situations where Armenians look me in the face and say, "Oh, well, you were born here. You're not really Armenian."
Mhm.
Um, and I do feel like that has changed quite a bit over time. You don't really hear that as often from the community, which I feel like is good because it shows that things are changing and it's a positive change. But it does make it complicated for um, so many Armenians who want to have that relationship with their culture, but feel like they're not allowed to and that they're barred from it. And I think one reason why my my art now is so Armenian focused is that I've truly realized how it's not just enjoyable to me to create these, but it's very healing and very important. And I've had um, Armenians from the community that have been pushed out or felt like they couldn't delve into their culture, felt like they couldn't try and learn their language because their family never taught them. They're like, "Oh, I'm mixed race," or "I was born here," or such and such reason, but they tell me that seeing my artwork made them want to learn the language, and that like makes me want to cry, because it's like, how do you mean that like I just drew these things and it's like having that effect on people? I have to do it more then, and it like gives it so much more purpose. Um, and yeah, so my relationship with my country, I mean, uh, I really love Armenia. I've been there only about 3 times. Hopefully, I will be there more because I just love to keep going there. Um, it's interesting. A lot of Armenians love the main city, but for me, I really feel kind of at home at the villages. I have
Mhm.
a lot of family members who live in the villages, and as someone who like loves nature, I guess you could say, honestly, it becomes a form of escapism. A lot of people who live in the village would rather live in the city, and a lot of people who live in cities would rather live in villages. So it's all just kind
Yeah.
of it's an interesting, like, I guess, ideology. But um, yeah, I feel like I've kind of rambled about several
Well,
stuff there, but
you are bringing up a lot of really, I think, important concepts. And as an Arab American Palestinian heritage, we've had, I think every diaspora culture has similar experiences. And
yeah,
um, there are those who are alienated because they can be receiving those messages of, sort of um, saying, well, you don't belong, or, individual experiences can have people interpret situations in totally different ways. And it's very understandable because it can be very tough and disheartening for someone to say, oh, you're not the real identity, whatever that
yeah,
means. And in fact, you know, the reason Baladi magazine is named Baladi is it means my homeland in Arabic. But, I named it that because I see it as a way of searching for homeland. I mean, I said I'm going to create this magazine and it's going to be my version of like a global homeland,
hmm,
trying to go beyond sort of those boundaries of what do we mean by home, because
yeah,
in the diaspora, yeah, there's so many different interpretations and challenges. Yeah, so you've definitely hit on something, and then to have your art express that those foundational concepts, that really obviously ring true for folks. And probably for me too. I mean, I just traveled in Armenia this summer. And when I first saw your artwork, I'm like, that's really ringing some bells for me, So, and I'm not even Armenian, So you are communicating something very important there.
thank you.
So actually, I might ask you, what does homeland mean in Armenian language? Do you know the word for that?
Homeland, I feel like I know the word.
Heritage,
I
maybe.
believe it might be Heidenik or
Mhm.
something like that. I believe it's Heidenik.
Okay.
But if I'm wrong and there's any Armenians here, please forgive me.
Just put it in
Um,
the chat. Yes, and anyone watching, feel free to put a question in the chat. But yeah, it's a great country, and you brought up some great important points, I think, with the diaspora as well. So
yeah.
I did bring your website up.
Yes.
Speaking of your art, and so is this first image here part of your graphic novel, or is it?
Yeah, this is Nara and Ara. Nara is the main character of the graphic novel,
Mm,
the Pomegranate Princess. My idea for the Pomegranate Princess is to start it off as a web comic that will be kind of released on a weekly basis, and then over time, I would really love it to get published.
mhm.
Right now, it's still in the creation stages. My sort of idea for this whole story is that it's going to be two books, and I've written the first full book, and now I'm illustrating it. So last year, I have sketched over 200 pages of this graphic novel, and I imagine that this first book is going to take 200 more pages based off of where I am in the writing.
Yeah.
Um, it's really special to me, and my plan is basically once I do finish with those sketches is that I'm going to start finalizing them and releasing them. Right now, the preview is kind of already available to read as in early access,
Mhm.
um, just because I felt like it's kind of been sitting for so long, and I've had a couple of artists and professionals see it and be like, you have to put this out there already. You can't just keep waiting. And I'm like, okay, fine. I guess it's time. And then once I do get closer to the actual release date, it will be more freely and publicly available, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, that's kind of, yeah, it's like a story that's like my baby, because it holds all of my love of homeland and all these complicated and beautiful ideas that come with it. Some of them are so simple, which is simply just the love of nature itself, and
Mm-hmm.
realizing that homeland, it isn't just an idea.
Mm-hmm.
There is there's real physicalness to it. I was reading Braiding Sweetgrass by, I believe, Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she's an indigenous American. And I wanted to read it because my interest in the environment and in land is really important to me. And I live in America, and I feel like it's important that I know the ideals of the indigenous people here. And I didn't realize how extremely deeply I would connect to so much she said in regards to the tragedy that she's been through, and how much it connects to tragedy of other people who have been displaced, such as Armenians, Artsakh Armenians, Palestinians. It's crazy how universal it feels, how it feels like. And that even helped me further with the writing of this book and the next book, is realizing that it's much wider than just, oh, there's war and there's chaos and there's loss. There's a true like idea of ownership of nature, ownership of land, and how that is so insanely different to people who are indigenous to a land, and they see the land as a gift. And when you're given a gift, you cherish it and you take care of it. So that's kind of, it's really just taken the reins to what I want this story to mean. And I hope that people love it.
Yeah, that's very well said. And indigeneity is definitely a strong theme with Validity as well. So I really understand what you're saying. And in terms of the environment, the idea of the pomegranate, I know just from my limited exposure to Armenian culture, the pomegranate has symbolic meaning. It's very important. And
Yes.
isn't there even a religious connotation to it as well? And can you explain that some more?
Yeah, so the pomegranate itself, I mean, it's one of those things where fruit and nature and trees in general, in many cultures, all have so much deep meaning to them, because they feed people and sustain people. And then people also see a fruit as a reflection of maternal and feminine identities, because it's this idea of is like the child of the tree itself. And so it has a lot of connections with fertility. And the pomegranate itself is really big in the symbolism, because they kind of see it as like this mother fruit filled with many children. The color red, of course, is very symbolic in connections to things like blood or fire, and those also have a lot of deep religious connections. There's even like, say, despite how a lot of these connections are very pre-Christian, there's some Christian connotation too, because a lot of people like to say that they believe the apple from Adam and Eve would have more realistically been a pomegranate in case of I guess, nature at that supposed time, which is kind of a really interesting way to see it. And I just love pomegranate symbolism in general. There is I remember I took an Armenian culture class in university, and we learned this really interesting thing where, in very old Armenian wedding tradition, where the bride would throw a pomegranate at like the door, and supposedly however many seeds fell out was how many children the couple was going to have.
Wow.
Which is quite interesting, because I mean, I seem to recall a great grandmother of mine having like up to 9 children or something, and it's like, oh, I wonder whether or not that might have been connected. But either way, it is just really interesting, because yeah, I mean, I do believe the main symbolism is fertility and motherhood, And even though I will say Nara doesn't necessarily represent fertility in a motherhood sense, but she represents fertility in a nature sense, which in turn kind of makes her motherly to nature, to people in general. And it is this sort of connection where like nature itself we kind of see as mother. We call it Mother Nature. This idea of fertility of land where plants sprouting from the ground and soil being considered fertile soil. It's all these things that kind of connect back to like the earth and land being seen as a motherly, giving, protecting figure. And it's a really comforting idea too, because sometimes when you feel like the world is against you when it comes to war and racism and hatred, and you feel like everyone is against you, it's kind of comforting to sort of detach from human acceptance and feel like, well, even if everyone hates me, the land and the earth and the soil and the trees will be like your mother. They will comfort you and they'll care for you and they'll remember you when you are gone. And yeah, that's kind of a lot of the
right. And
connections, I guess.
And we all belong with nature. Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, very well said.
Thank you.
Just scroll through the site just a bit more, hoping this will show up correctly.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I see it at least.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think it is. So these are more panels from the graphic novel, is that correct?
These are more like illustrations of characters in certain scenes. So the blue maiden we see is the Pomegranate Princess. Her name is Nara, and she has two sisters, the River Princess and the Apricot Princess. And their colors, of course, represent the Armenian flag. They're red, blue, and orange. A really fun fact about the Armenian flag is that the color orange, in Armenian we call it naranjagwin, which means orange colored, orange like the fruit. But whenever we're referring to the flag, we always call the orange in the flag tsiranagwin, which means apricot colored. And we don't really use that term when referring to orange in general, but we use it when we refer to the orange in the flag. And so that's little Apricot Princess right there.
I remember when I was there, it was June. Yeah. And just anywhere walking, you would see apricot trees.
Yeah.
And I remember having like this giant bag of apricots that somehow made it back to my Airbnb, I just had to but yeah, that was very nice, just very interesting. And so I can see how that would be. I mean, I love that in the flag. I love that idea. So here I'm going to go down another few panels. These are lovely as well. I see someone reaching for a pomegranate.
Yes.
Nice. I go further. And what is the name of the older gentleman? Did you tell me?
So he's the mountain man. His name is Ara, and his name is very much connected to many different legends and mountain regions. So he both represents Mount Ararat, he represents Mount Aragat, and also another mountain called Araler, which is the mountain itself is like the silhouette of a man lying down. Ara is very interesting. The word Ara itself is kind of like very connected to Armenia, and of course the connection and connotation of men, the male figure. And I wanted a character that was, I wanted a masculine character that was extremely loving and protective and gentle. And that also represents a lot of things in Armenian culture, such as, again, that extreme love of our mountains. There is something about mountainous regions where the mountains are sometimes seen, many times they're seen as a god because they're just so large and Mount Ararat is like a figure that you can see from almost every window in Armenia, you know?
Right.
And the interesting thing about Ara is that he is designed to kind of look like an older man, even though he's actually quite young.
Mhm.
If you do scroll up, you'll see him without the beard. And it is kind of like slightly related
Oh,
to,
yeah.
yeah, but he is kind of meant to look older when he has his beard. And the reason also that his hair is white is that I wanted it to reflect the white mountain tops that are covered in snow. Like Mount Ararat always has snow on it, of course. It's a massive peak, but Mount Aragat as well, which is in Armenia. Even like during the summertime, at the very, very tip, there will still be a little bit of snow, which is always so interesting that you go there in like a t-shirt, but there's a little bit of snow at the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
His skin being purple, also, it's this idea of atmospheric perspective, which is when mountains or land is very far away, it kind of appears like this hazy purple color.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, again, but him looking like an old man also does play into an interesting part of the story later on where he tries to disguise himself. And I love like those uh, funny little quirky things that are in fairy tales and whatnot. So I won't speak too much on what happens there, but yeah.
That's fantastic. But I appreciate the waviness of the white hair because you do kind of think of mountains or sort of, and then the white for the snow. I just that's
Yeah.
great. That is really
I
great.
also wanted it to contrast a lot with Nada's black hair, so their colors themselves really kind of pop out against each other, which is really important, I guess, in design. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And so we may have just talked about these. I'm switching over to the Pomegranate Princess tab.
Yes.
And so there's more of your sketches here.
Hmm.
And so just in general, in regard to art, oh, I just love this one with are those oranges or apricots?
Yes, they're oranges.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We had recently picked a bunch of the oranges and mandarins in our tree, so I felt like it would be a fun time of the year to draw that.
That's wonderful. That is so
Thank
great.
you.
So I'm just going to scroll through these really quick.
Yes.
We've seen those, and folks can go and to your website and
Yes.
peruse that. Um, Also, the HBO Max Fired on Mars. I found this
Yes.
interesting. So when one does character design or prop art, are you? It looks like these are more like concepts. Is that what it is, or?
I wouldn't call them concepts. It's mainly that they're line art, line drawings, because within it mostly depends on the animation studio you're working for, but majority of studios, if you are you are classified as a designer, you're
Mhm.
only doing line art, and then there will be the painters and the color artists who will go in and add color and lighting, etc. But these are more, yeah, these are references that the animators then use when they are animating the scene. It's meant to be like crisp, clear drawings of how the props look in a situation, in a scene. And I guess the best way to describe a prop is anything that a character interacts with.
Mhm.
So a prop could be a part of a background until it's picked up and moved or something happens with it. Um, and yeah, Fired on Mars is it's a 2D animated series. It's an adult animated series about a guy who gets a job on Mars and then he gets fired, but he still has to live in the colony.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch that. I'm a sci-fi fantasy horror fan, so anything within that realm is great. And I probably have a really not so smart question, but so it looks like you're drawing like things we've seen a lot of, like a wheelbarrow or
Yes.
suitcase and so on. And why is it that they would ask for new drawings of that if they have like established images? Like, what is it that a prop designer or artist, um, why do they do that instead of like going to, okay, digital commons or something and asking for that? Is it because of certain perspectives on it, or I'm just
I
curious.
mean, yeah, some items need to be shown in different sizes, different perspectives. The line weight can sometimes be important, as well as the fact that like an item can, even if it's a very simple item, can end up looking any which way. And if there's going to be, say, 10, 20, 50 animators working on a scene, they all need to have the same exact specific reference
Mm-hmm.
so that the project can be consistent. And a lot of the times, the directors, they have a specific vision for an item, no matter how simple it is. Like I can draw a cocktail shaker that it has it's like a metal, those two metal cups. And then the director will be like, oh, actually, we want the cocktail shaker with this specific type of lid. And so it can be quite simple, but it can end up being very complex, all the different things. Like say a water bottle and how it looks with certain amounts of water in it or when it's getting crushed. You kind of, a lot of this can be called what animators will use or call as extremes, which is the most extreme poses of something, and the animators will then in between these extremes, where it's like an item that is in its full form and then an item completely crushed, so that then said animator can work in between that in however which way they see fit. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because a lot of props can be super complex, like designing a car or a wheel, and then it can be something super simple as like a tiny pill that you feel like doesn't need to be designed, but it needs to be designed.
Yeah. And first of all, thank you for tolerating my very uninformed questions.
No, it's totally fine.
Because I don't mean to say that they're like simple to draw at all. I could not do anything like this on this page for sure. But yeah, I just think that's, to me, that was interesting because I've never quite seen this done before. And I really like this. Is it a lizard with the sack of eggs? I think that's really cool. That's really
Yeah, it's a gecko's egg sac. Very interesting to draw.
So did you have to like research some of this then, I guess, to
Oh yeah, I asked so many questions, which I think my supervisors has found kind of entertaining, where
mm,
it's like I'm asking 100 of questions about like what specific type of gas pedal this truck is supposed to have, and then Googling truck pedals, and it's like, God, I don't like trucks, and now I have to research truck pedals. And it's so funny because the job ends up turning you also into a researcher, because when you're designing something, you have to look so many different things up just to see how it works. I mean, probably the hardest one is this trash crusher, and it has thousands of gears, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what a trash crusher is or looks like or works, but you gotta do what you gotta do. And then sometimes you'll have the fun ones. I really like the organic ones, like an apple or food, because it's not as complex as a trash crusher, I would say.
yeah, that is really interesting and great. So, oh, I see okra. Oh, there's
Yes, jars of okra. Yeah.
no, I really like that. I really like that.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, so I'm going to look at characters design real quick. We might have
Yes.
talked about some of this, but was this for another project or just,
No, this is all personal work for my portfolio. I love character design. It's what I want to do professionally. So this is just a lot of my work over the years.
Mhm.
It hasn't been updated in a while because I have been so focused on the Pomegranate Princess.
Yeah.
But it is still what I greatly enjoy doing. And you can still see some of Pomegranate Princess stuffs in there as well. But a lot of character design is trying to practice different art styles, showcase sort of that you have that diversity in style, because majority of the time, if you're going on a show, um, you have to work with a style that they have already developed. It's
Hmm.
not that you're just drawing whatever you want. You have to draw what they want, whether it's realistic, cutesy, adorable cat in a pumpkin, or like a terrifying creature. So yeah,
Yeah, right. That's really great. And then I'm just
thank you.
pulling up illustration, and
Yeah.
so some similar, maybe images from before.
Hmm.
Uh, oh wow, there's lots of good stuff here, and
Oh, thank you.
I can see how detailed and intricate this has to be. So that's just really great. I do have a question about,
Thank you so much.
because I noticed that you like you have like a style where there's a lot of people within
Hmm.
the frame. And is that just something fun that you like to do, or is
Yeah,
it, yeah.
that had started with the class assignment of the Armenian music, the blue ladies with the red instruments.
Uh-huh.
Because it was meant to be where like we had to draw like over 100 things in one drawing, and I'm like, what is a way where I can kind of sort of cheat at this, where I basically illustrate like 10 to 20 women, and then you kind of copy and paste the design over and over again. And
Uh-huh.
it ends up becoming a pattern in a way. It ends up becoming like a design, a pattern that you can use on textiles, on clothing, on stuff like that. And I realized that it was really interesting and pleasing to the eye. And so that's kind of how that sort of collection continued, is that it's really fun having something that's like, it looks really busy from far away, but when you look up close, there's so many different things. Each lady is holding a different instrument, is wearing a different item, has a different face shape, eye shape. I just love like
Yeah.
delving into like trying to make each person look as different as possible and see what you come up with.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
That's like your signature. If I ever see these out in the wild, I'll know that and I really, that's really great. So,
Thank you.
sure. All right, I think that's the end of that. I just wanted to go through that because,
Yes.
I enjoy looking at them and just getting a sense of, some different things that you like to do. So, yeah, let me
Mhm.
come back. So, something I also want to come back to, we've talked about Armenia, and I'm going to share a different screen in a moment.
Mhm.
Uh, we've talked about Armenia, and something we referenced at the beginning of the session was the issue of Artsakh, and
Yeah.
that you are actually, is it you've created a collaborative, or you're editing a collaborative digital zine called Split Pomegranate Sacred Seeds.
Yes.
And I want to see if I can bring that up on the screen as well.
Mhm.
Um, Here, just a moment. I will look for that. I'm actually going to your link tree
Yeah.
so so I can locate it.
Yes. So yeah, Split Pomegranate Sacred Seeds is a digital zine that I organized and created. Um, it was kind of in the midst of everyone being displaced, all the Armenians being displaced from Artsakh, and this intense feeling of just dread and needing to do something, needing to help in some way, and just not really knowing how. Um, and I've realized that there's a lot of other Armenians that sort of grapple with those issues. They feel a lot of guilt and helplessness and hopelessness. Um, and I wanted to create a project where a bunch of Armenian artists, it's like you how can I make it so that we can all like shoulder this together instead of like one person shouldering like too much. If every single artist, if every single writer just contributes one single piece, we can create like this large collective, sell it, and send all the proceeds to charity for like charities like All for Armenia, Hike for Our Heroes. There's so many others that I also list on that website as well. And just this way where, and I had a lot of artists who joined, and then they were like, I felt helpless, and now I feel like I'm a part of something that's helping, that's like, feel like I'm a part of something bigger. And that's so special to me because I thought that we would only get like 50 to 60 artists, and we ended up getting like over 100 people applying.
That's great.
And it's such, yeah, it's so cool. It's been like so crazy to organize because there's so much to do and so many people to message and to account for. But I'm really, really thankful. One of my friends, Ilzy, she is helping with the organization of the files themselves into this book because I have experience illustrating, but I'm not very good with files and setting files up. So she's really been amazing at helping me with that. And then, we're going to be selling that essentially. And we're also going to be including a raffle. So every single person who purchases the zine will also be entered in a raffle to win a bunch of really cool items and artwork from many of the artists who are part of the zine themselves. And being as it will be a digital zine, there will be a hidden link, and we have like a little sticker prize where the first 3 people who can find the hidden link in this whole book will win a bundle of Armenian stickers. So there's just, it's really exciting, and I guess it's just trying to create something to help people in a time of tragedy. There's a lot of essays of people grappling with their own Armenianness, their feelings of guilt, and I think it's like a very beautiful, diverse collection of both artwork that has a lot of pain in it and artwork that has so much joy in it. And what I'm really grateful for is that we actually have a lot of non-Armenian artists, and seeing so many of my own friends and other people who aren't Armenian, but they want to create a piece of art or writing to help. And it's so special because it can sometimes feel really isolating. It can feel like no one cares. And I want this project to show how much so many people care.
Yeah, and really, it is so important. I think this, is just an instant classic in a way for other Armenians or Armenians in the diaspora either way. Because as a Palestinian American, I'll look back, 10 years, 20 years, I'll find, art that someone has done, or poetry, or prose, something where someone has sort of incorporated the moment into their work, and it creates conversation, I think, which is so important in helping people who are not of that region or of whatever the issue is, connect with it and understand it more. So I think it helps with community, building community within the community, but then also just giving folks a chance to learn about something they may not have known about before. So I think this is when I first noticed, because I was searching for information about Artsakh, and this is one of the first things I noticed, and that's when I reached out to you.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was because of this, actually. So, I think I'm going to just real quick click over, because we still have a little bit of time. But the historian in me wants to pull up just a quick overview of the Artsakh issue so that people know a little more about what we're talking about. And even with this, I have a question. Now, Artsakh is also referred to as Nagorno Karabakh, and my understanding is that that is the Azerbaijani name for the same region. Is that correct, or is that also like
To be
maybe?
fair, I feel like we both kind of call it that,
Oh,
but because I've seen the words used very interchangeably.
yeah, me
Um,
too. So
in general, a majority of Armenians call it Artsakh.
mhm.
So, um, yeah, it's such a I don't know, it's such a deep issue that just makes you think of so many things how something like this could happen.
Right.
Um, yeah, but for my knowledge at least, we mostly call it Artsakh.
Okay. Yeah, and
But it's yeah, it's referred to as both whenever the conflict is being described, I guess, just to help specify with the region, since different people call it different things.
yeah, and that's kind of a indicative of the South Caucasus anyway, because of the multi-layered issues. You know,
Yes, yeah,
because even the small profile map we're looking at right now labels it as Soviet era Nagorno Karabakh autonomous oblast, which essentially meant it or means that it was an autonomous region within Azerbaijan, um, first declared, you know, during and right after the Soviet era. So, but so I'm pulling up this BBC country profile. I'll probably put it in our description as well for the YouTube video, just so people will have something to go to and get a sense as to what's going on. And so, just an overview of what was going on during the Soviet era. This area that you see on the screen right now, what had indigenous Armenians living there, and as these countries became independent from the Soviet Union in about 1990 or 91, this region, Artsakh or Nagorno Karabakh, remained within Azerbaijan, even though most folks within the region were Armenian. And as you might imagine, conflict ensued over who had, you know, the rights to the area. So there's a timeline here of events, but so I won't go through everything, but it is worth watching. But the ultimate result, unfortunately, is that in September 2023, just about 4 months ago, um, I would say all of the inhabitants, or almost all of Artsakh, were displaced into Armenia. So my understanding is it's almost completely depopulated of Armenians at this point, indigenous Armenians. And so there are a lot of refugees now, like over 100,000 people in Armenia who are displaced and needing support and needing help. And so that's why this digital zine is so important, not only to raise money, but to spread awareness of this situation. So I will put this link in our description, and it's worth looking into just to start to get more information. But is there anything you'd like to add about that?
yeah. I mean, it is such a deep and complicated issue. I
Mhm.
sometimes have a hard time really feeling like I can fully discuss it well because it's like I'm not a historian, you know?
Yeah.
But I guess it just goes back to again, what I was talking about, nature and indigenous people and the idea of ownership of land itself.
Right.
And simply looking at history in terms of like how long an ethnic group has been a part of a certain place.
Right.
Because this issue can get so complex, you know. There are times where it's, you know, you want to get back what once was yours, this whole idea of that. But you don't want there to be more war.
Mm.
Um, you don't want your people to live with this idea that they've lost so much land, but you don't want to go to the far lengths of becoming a nationalist where you're
Yeah.
like, oh, give me back everything. It's like, how do you even grapple with that? Because especially if you look at ancient history and you know, periods in time where there were massive empires and these empires had land from all these different areas, but those areas that they had probably were not all ethnically the same.
Mm.
So it's just so deep and complex. But to really look at like the history of, you know, if you simply look at the population of Armenians that lived at the in the Ottoman Empire
Mhm.
before it, and then after 1915,
Yeah.
the fact it's like you can't really explain away all of those people from that region disappearing.
Right.
You really can't, you know. You can't explain the villages that were completely emptied and destroyed. You can't explain the churches and monasteries with Armenian lettering on them and act like it was just like, you know, it just goes so deep
Mhm.
and it's so complex too. I'm a descendant of a genocide survivor. I was named after a genocide survivor. My great grandmother, her name was Agavny, and uh, she she had been through it, and all the men in her family were, you know, killed, and it was just her mother, and her sister that were left.
Mhm.
And I just think about this insane idea that like only three, only these people from their family were left, and if you know, if they hadn't made it, I literally simply would not exist. It's such an insane feeling that like they made it and they went through it. And there are people who choose to deny it. And then if they don't choose to deny it, they choose to justify it. And this same exact thing happens over and over again. It happens in Palestine where people will deny, and then if they can't deny any longer, they'll justify. And
Mhm.
they said the same thing now for people who first rejected the idea of the Armenian genocide. They're like, oh, the genocide happened, but the Armenians deserved it because they were terrorists.
Mhm.
Because for some reason, women and children and old and professors and all these people were that, you know. And
Yeah.
it's I guess, yeah, it's kind of hard to really fully understand and really fully talk about it because I feel like the person who is on the other side, who is against you, they don't put their emotion into the argument. So they
Mhm.
feel like they're like, well, oh, well, I'm logical because I'm not getting emotional about it. But it's like, well, if you truly care, if it means something to you, you should get emotional about it. It should be hard. It should be hard to talk about because it is hard to talk about. It shouldn't be easy. And
Right.
it's, yeah, I mean, as you can tell, I have like a hard time really putting a conclusion to it because the truth is, it's like there is no proper, it feels like there is no proper conclusion because, again, if you don't want there to be more war, you don't want there to be more loss, what in the world can you do? I'm not really sure. And that is a lot of where this project, this zine came from, is not knowing what to do. So you just have to try and help people because that's all you can do is talk about it and try to help people.
Yeah. You're bringing up, yeah, some other points that are good to point out. I've been doing some more investigating of the history of the Armenian genocide as well. I've just got like Britannia reference up here. which I'll put in the chat for people to read. But one thing I've learned just from looking into this is that because the perpetrator, Turkey, was not held to account after this, it led to, Germany enacted the Holocaust. Just what would that really be? 1915, like 20, 25 years later,
Yeah.
So,
There is a really, really good documentary our professor showed us it's called Germany and the Secret Genocide.
mhm,
And it was probably the most insane and eye-opening thing I'd ever seen, because
mhm,
it really opens your eyes to, a lot of people feel like conflict is strictly related to just racism and just dehumanization. But it's kind of this realization that the people in power just want more land and more resources. And using racism as a tool to make it easier for their
that's
soldiers to enact these things. Because at the depth of it, it was just this desire for more land and more power. And but it becomes this idea where, like, oh, it's because it's actually a racism issue, it's just too political to talk about.
yeah,
But the people in power can just get away with it because they get what they want. They get the land, they get the power, and they use people's anger to help fuel it and continue it. And yeah, a lot of the perpetrators of the genocide, they found that there were actually many German generals that were also involved, and that many of those generals later on went to work in the Nazi Party.
hmm
And so it's truly is crazy and insane how deep it does go. Sometimes it's this sick idea of, like, was Armenia like was what they did to Armenians like this little experiment before doing something bigger? Sometimes it feels like that a lot. It feels like that with Artsakh. It's like, is it this idea that if Azerbaijan can do this to Armenia and get away with it, the larger country can do it to another country and get away with it because they see that happening? It feels like it repeats itself because the punishment isn't given, and it keeps going until there is truly punishment and justice enacted.
yeah.
Yeah.
The same thought has crossed my mind, because very little was said about Artsakh. I mean, people who knew, people who didn't
Mm-hmm.
know had no idea. And then the issue with Gaza happened is happening now. Oh, I think have I lost you? So while I'm waiting for Agavny to come back, I'm going to pull up one other item I just want to mention to folks. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to pull up and Agavny just texted me. She's coming back. I think her connection was lost for some reason. But to follow up on what we were saying about the Armenian genocide, there is a very interesting book that was written based on the Armenian genocide, called The 40 Days of Musa Dagh, written by Franz Werfel, who was actually, let me see, he was not German. I should have checked on this before I brought it up, but in any case, he had traveled in Ottoman Syria and had noticed the Armenian refugees living in the area of what is now Lebanon and Syria. And so he decided, hi, Agavny, sorry.
Hi, I'm
I didn't kick you off. but what I'm talking about now, just to round up, because I thought I'd go ahead, you had mentioned that some German generals may have been involved in the Armenian genocide. Is that correct? There was a book, I don't know if you've heard of it before, called The 40 Days of Musa Dagh.
Yes,
Oh, you have heard of it.
my one of my professors, he is actually considered the cultural consultant of Musa Dagh itself. He is
Oh, wonderful.
Professor Shamasian. He's great. I loved his classes, and
Mm.
if you've ever seen the movie The Promise, the battle, I believe the Battle of Musa Dagh is like a very formative scene, and
Mhm.
he was the cultural consultant for that scene.
Oh,
And I actually know several Armenians who their family comes from that region, and it's very like it's a really powerful story because it was like one of those small moments where people fought back.
mhm.
It's a really deep story, and um, yeah, that book is so important. I believe our professor said it was like translated into so many different languages that it was like one of those first accounts of people actually reading and learning about the genocide itself was through this book. Um, so it's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to remember where Franz Werfel was from. Oh, Austrian Bohemian novelist. Okay. Yeah, anyway, I thought I'd just bring that up as well for anyone interested in pursuing, uh, topics around the issue of the Armenian genocide. And now I have another movie to watch called The Promise because I have not seen that film before. So I'd like to find out more about that. All right, so yeah, thank you for all of this great information. And so, in regard to the zine, just want to say a couple more things about it. I'm going to come back. Here it is. So, on the website, you do
Yes.
have some featured artists
Yes.
listed. And for those who are interested, you might go ahead and just explore their work on Instagram or elsewhere, wherever these are linked to.
Yes.
But we do have a few samples that I've put on our on a PowerPoint. So I'd like to bring those up, and the links to these artists are also in the YouTube description box. But you should now be seeing, is it Gevork
Yes.
Sherbetchian?
Yeah, these are some cropped images of a couple of the art pieces that are actually going to be in the zine itself.
Mm-hmm.
So these are like little sneak peeks.
Yeah. And it looks like that is a box. I forget what you call that.
Yeah, it's a khachkar, so it is a cross stone, which is a very like important like Armenian artistic um, cultural item, I believe. I don't
Oh,
know if you would call a stone an item, but it's those really large cross stones that Armenians have been carving for a very long time. It has a really interesting history going back to pre-Christian times when Armenians were carving dragon stones or vishabakars.
yeah.
It's like this. It's really cool to kind of see that slow progression of stone carving within an area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I went to several monasteries during my time there and saw some of those stones. So
Yeah.
that really attracted my eye. Um, this is very nice too, and it seems kind of mythical. I see like maybe a lion or
Yeah, you see those. So this is by my amazing friend Lily. She isn't Armenian. She's from Hawaii. She is so insanely talented, and I was so excited that she wanted to be involved. She illustrated the Yarkhushta, which is an Armenian cultural dance, and those little images you see, those little animals in the background there, called arales, which
Mhm.
are these are mythical Armenian dogs that have wings. And honestly, like their story is so sweet. It's supposedly said that that they revive fallen soldiers with their kisses, which is just and their wings. It's believed that they come from Mount Ararat, that they come from the mountains. It's just a really sweet mythical creature, I feel like,
That
and she drew them really adorably, honestly.
yeah, that is a great story. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, okay. And Shay, I think is the name.
Yeah, this is Shay. It's a very cropped image, but I believe they illustrated it was Vahagan, the dragon slayer, who is another sort of Armenian mythical hero. His name is kind of self-explanatory because it's Dragon Slayer. But yeah, this is a little cropped image of that as well.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
this one, I just love this.
Yeah, Maral, her art style is truly so beautiful. I really could believe everyone should follow her because her work, her life, her love of Armenia is so deep. And she was one of the first people that I told this project about when I had the idea. I was like, I want to make this, and so I really like commend her for kind of supporting me in the very early stages of this zine, and offering her art to be part of it. Her work is beautiful. There's just so much color, and it feels like you're in a dream when you look at it. Um, so yeah, I love her work, and it's really
You
great.
know, at first I thought, and I'm still not sure. At first I thought, oh, is that are those ocean waves? And I'm like, because I saw the birds, and I said, no, I think those are mountains. And
They are mountains, yeah.
yeah, but something about that movement, like I don't know, the movement of water, the movement of mountains, they're both
Yeah.
have like these strengths. I don't know. I went very esoteric and deep into this image. So yeah, but they're all just great. And
Yeah, they're really talented, and I'm just really excited to have them and many, many more amazing artists that are going to be a part of the zine,
yeah,
that we are hoping to release sometime either mid or late February. We're getting pretty close to finalizing it, and fingers crossed it all goes well. So, yeah,
oh, I'm sure it will. And
thank
I'm
you.
anxiously awaiting to get my copy. Um,
Yeah.
I'm just putting your link tree up here just to let folks know that I'm putting the link tree in the description of the YouTube, description box. So anything we talked about, they can probably find on here. And if they'd like to commission you for your work, I'm sure they can reach you through here too.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that we haven't covered? We've really had a journey here this last
Yeah.
hour or so. So, anything else you'd like to say?
Gosh, I don't know. I talked so much. Um, but I guess it's just this idea of I feel like we all have a culture. Everyone has a beautiful past, and not a lot of people really delve into it. And it can be truly so, first, like not only healing, but uh, really building upon your own character to sort of go into your own history and really really embrace your culture, especially when it comes to things like food, clothing, all these things. The Armenian community, Armenia itself, is very, I would say, it's become quite modernized and westernized and sort of Europeanized, which has its pros and its cons. I mean, one of the cons for me being is the sort of minimalization of cultural fashion and heritage. Um, there are so many countries and people that still have access to their own cultural fashion and clothing. You know, people from India, people from Mexico who wear their clothing proudly and wear it to events and things like that. And Armenians, we will we very rarely, like only for maybe like a for dance recitals or for this and that, but it's never something that people wear on the regular, and it's like something that I wish we did. It's I Because there is a truly a deep loss when it comes to that. So, like one thing that I like to say to Armenians is that like we really should uh, bring that back. and sort of embrace all those really gorgeous parts of our culture. And that's what kind of inspires my art a lot as well, is that it's me putting like that desire out there into the world, is that like I'm living vicariously through all of these women in these cultural clothing when I draw them.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's great. Well, I'm just so glad that you were able to visit today and discuss your work. And for me, I think it is important that more people know about the country of Armenia, as well as Georgia and Azerbaijan as well. I think that whole region has a lot to offer. Um, but I'm just so pleased we were able to have this conversation, and I'm sure we'll talk again at another time. So thank you
Yeah,
for being here.
thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
You're welcome.